Welcome, everyone. Okay, I have to be a librarian about it, I see. Shh. It's a great joke, isn't it? So welcome to this year's Literary Lubbock. I'm Bella Gerlich. I'm the Dean of Libraries. We are happy to be able to host this event in our newly renovated Croslin room, where we hope to see you at many more library and university press events in the upcoming months. This particular event is special, not just because we showcase wonderful authors and our work that the University Press does, but because it enables the funding to publish books in the Grover E. Murray series. The libraries are proud to have the TTUP Press as our colleagues. We buy books, they publish them. It's a natural partnership that we, the university, and the community benefit greatly from. Next year, the libraries, the University Press, and the Louise Hopwood Underwood Center for the Arts will use Literary Lubbock as the kickoff event for the inaugural Lubbock Book Festival weekend. We are very excited for that collaboration. While initially in its planning stages, it's slated to happen in October of 2017. So please mark your calendars. Now, just a few words of thanks to the many people who made this event possible. Our sponsors, all of whom are listed on your programs, and the staff and volunteers who put their hours and time into making this event possible. Gretchen Scott, our Texas Tech Friends of the Library Board President, Marie Meyer, our Texas Tech Friends of the Library Board Event Chair, the Texas Tech Press staff, the Texas Library staff, our student ambassadors and student assistants. And of course, thank you to our emcee, Barry Corbin, and the support of our president, Lawrence Skuvenek, and those deans out there tonight. And to all of you out there for attending and supporting our University Press. Now I'd like to ask Dr. President Skuvenek to come up and say a few words.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for being here for this evening and for supporting the Texas Tech University Press. Bella was kind enough to prepare some talking points for me, but I'm going to deviate from most of those, Bella. But you'll recognize some aspects of this. Texas Tech has many wonderful traditions. In fact, right now at this moment, there's one going on downtown, the pig roast. And that is a tradition that is only 3 years younger than this university. And so I was supposed to be there. But and I always love that event, but I think tonight's event here is so special. I was very pleased that I could be here, and I told the pig roast another time. But last evening we had a ring ceremony for those soon-to-be Texas Tech University graduates. And we did that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and it's really quite an incredible ceremony. Last year we graduated close to 8,000 students, and I think every graduate-to-be was there to get their ring in anticipation of their graduation. But what strikes me about an event like that is the number of parents and friends who are there. There's standing room only over in the market. And if ever you're feeling down after a hard day, you should just go out onto campus and start shaking the hands of students and say, congratulations. Their love of this school, their enthusiasm for what they're doing, the anticipation of their degree really reminds you of why we're here and the very important things we do. And the press is a great example of that. It's also one of the many it's a great tradition of Texas Tech. They're only established in 1971. Compared to other presses, it's relatively young. There are over 3,000 four-year institutions in the United States. Bella, I know you told me there were 2,600 in your notes, but don't believe everything you read in Wikipedia. I got this from the Carnegie Foundation for Higher Education. There are only about 100 presses. So Texas Tech is very distinguished to be in the top 3 or 4% of institutions that have a press. And presses are such a catalyst for the dissemination of intellectual information and activity, and they really contribute to the culture of a university. A press demonstrates the breadth of scholarly activity at an institution, and also they sponsor and provide for research that might not be necessarily mainstream. I think about 80% of the books published by our press are in the humanities and social sciences. And Texas Tech, Mr. Corbin, is kind of a misnomer. This is not a technological school. The largest college is arts and sciences. There's a rich tradition of the liberal arts. We have a wonderful college of visual and performing arts. And the press gives an audience and a stage for those faculty engaged in research that otherwise may not have a means for sharing their work. The Texas Tech University Press is recognized as the preeminent publisher in West Texas. And here I won't deviate from some of the information Dr. Dean Gerlich has shared with me. It publishes about 25 books a year and has more than 400 books in their litany of all the books they've produced. It's particularly recognized for its works about the Southwest, the Great Plains, the U.S.-Mexican borderlands, focus on issues of history, culture, sustainability, natural history, and such, and other topics. As provost, I would get a copy of every book, and many times they would give me multiple books. And I have to admit, when I left that office, I took 2 books with me. I don't think that's called stealing, because I put them in the president's office. One was on Texas chilies, and the other was on wine. And the press does really give some presence to very Southwest characteristics, things that we're all very fond and dear of. The press has been recognized with more than 350 awards for both content and design. Awards that were provided from the West Texas Historical Association, the Oregon Book Awards, Women Writing the West, the Jewish Book Council, and the Institute of Letters. I think that when you look at the people who have published in the press, it's most impressive. Our featured authors tonight are evidence of that, but there have been many others. Janet Nuggebauer, Laura Cavazos, Wyman Meinzer, the state photographer, Paul Carlson, Red Stiegel, Walt McDonald, and Terry Allen. So our press certainly does help us represent the nature of West Texas, and which we all know is very special. And in closing, I do want to make a few comments that I think are important for any university that has a press. We have to realize that the presses are challenged by a number of issues. The idea that you can just publish books certainly is not going to maintain the stability of a press. They have to deal with all the new formats, the digital formats, and a culture that's very different in how they access information. A culture that we have in handheld devices, instant access to experts. But I'm very confident that under the leadership of Dean Gerlich and Courtney, that our press is responding to these issues. I can assure you that Texas Tech University is totally committed to our press. We understand that it's a very important part of a Tier 1 university. I actually did look up today, Bella, to see how many of the 115 universities in the highest research activity category, of which Texas Tech is one, have a press, and it's a relatively small number, probably less than half. So it's essential to Texas Tech and its aspirations to be regarded as a world-class institution that we support the press, we have the right leadership in place for the press, but like in so many other aspects of a university today, philanthropy and support are so essential to what we want to achieve, and that's why I'm so grateful for you being here this evening to support the activities of the library and the press. And I probably have spoken too long because I know we have many more interesting people to be here. But I do thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Bella. Thank you, Courtney, for what you're doing.
Hello, I'm Courtney Burkholder. I'm director of Texas Tech University Press, and I want to thank you all so much for supporting this event. It means everything to us. It is the Literary Lubbock reboot, so we missed a year, but we're back, and we're very excited. I'm going to keep this short so that we can get to the good stuff. I also wanted to encourage anybody who hasn't started on their salad, please go ahead. You won't offend me at all. Please start eating. The staff of Texas Tech University Press also thanks you for attending tonight, and I wanted to point them out. They're back in the corner, close to the sales table. Please wave. Wave. So that's them back there. I've been director of the press for about 2.5 years now, and I'm really excited about where we're going. We made a lot of changes along the way. And I really wanted to encourage you all to come out and visit our new bookstore. I'm not sure who all knows that we have a bookstore. It's located at 1120 Main Street, which is the corner of Main and Avenue K. It's in the vestibule of our office building, and we have a lot of our books for sale there. And we're open 8 to 5 weekdays, every day that's not a holiday, and then also we participate in the First Friday Art Trail. So I hope you'll come visit us, and you can always expect the unexpected when you pick up a Texas Tech University Press book. So now, the good stuff. I'm delighted to have Barry Corbin here tonight. Born in Lamesa, raised there and in Lubbock, educated in the theater department at Texas Tech and on the boards of Broadway, and the film and television sets of Hollywood, an actor's actor, whether Macbeth in Macbeth, Uncle Bob in Urban Cowboy, General Behringer in War Games, my personal introduction to Barry Corbin, Roscoe Brown in Lonesome Dove, also a favorite of mine, Maurice Minifield in Northern Exposure, or in any one of hundreds of other roles. Barry Corbin is a West Texas icon and a national treasure. I know I'm a fan. Please join me in welcoming tonight's MC, Barry Corbin.
Well, it is a pleasure to be back in Lubbock. I'll tell you what, I was born in Lamesa, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a little suburb of Lubbock down south of here. Now, every time I come back to Lubbock, it's grown so much that pretty soon that's not going to be a joke. Tahoka's almost there now. But my impression of Lubbock when I come in here now is that out here we're a flat DFW. You know, except we're more vital than they are. Dallas is like being in Atlanta. Fort Worth is like being in, well, Fort Worth. Lubbock is like, it personifies the West Texas culture and the West Texas people. I did an interview today with some of the press here, and they asked what I took with me when I left West Texas, how West Texas influenced my career. I said, if I hadn't been born here, I wouldn't be me. When I got to New York, they tried to get me to start talking like they did. I said, lose that hick accent. You know, you don't have to talk that way. And I said, no, when I talk some other way, they're paying me to do it. So I just stuck with what I was, you know, because if I lose my accent, I'll lose me. And I don't want to lose me because I'm one of you. And I like y'all a whole lot better than I like those Hollywood people. Anyway, it's good to be back here. When I went to Texas Tech, it was, in fact, at that time called Texas Technological College. The first year I was here, there was a big move to change it to Texas Tech University, which to some of us didn't make any sense whatsoever. We just touched on that a little bit. We tried to protest it, but through time and attrition, Texas Tech University does now make a lot of sense. It's one of the primary presses in the country, university press. And it has a fine medical school, a fine law school. When I was here, it was a speech department. There was oral interpretation, there was public speaking, and there was one person running the drama department, that is Ronald Schultz. Now, the next year, somebody else, they brought another person in, and pretty soon they had a faculty. But when I first started here, there were very few students who were in the drama department. We were all, everybody else wanted to be debaters and stuff. And so I got to play a lot of good parts. I got my best training here at Texas Tech. I learned everything I know here. If I'd gone to the University of Texas, I wouldn't have been able to play a part until I was a senior. When I was a freshman, I got to play all the leads, which was, I didn't know how lucky I was. Anyhow, we are here tonight to honor some people, and I have got a little note here, which there's not in the light up here, of course. The proceeds from the Literary Lubbock benefit the Grover E. Murray Studies in the American Southwest, a book series devoted to all aspects of culture, history, natural history, and the sciences as they serve to define the Southwest, as well as engage and enlighten us broadest constituency. President Grover E. Murray's lifelong passion and interest in all aspects of the American Southwest, scientific, historical, and cultural, is reflected in the scope and liveliness of the book series named in his honor. We have 2 honorees at this year's event. Now, let's allow Top Tier to serve us the wonderful meal they've prepared for us tonight. Time to eat, y'all. I'm gonna keep working y'all while you eat, because that's what they tell me I have to do. Our first honoree is chef and food writer Adan Medrano, a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, holds a master's degree from the University of Texas in Austin. He grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and Coahuila, Mexico, where he developed expertise in the flavor and profile and techniques of indigenous Texas Mexican food. Now, please note that one of Adan's recipes here, papas con rajas, or potatoes with poblano chili strips, is on tonight's menu and is featured on page 76 of his book. So y'all get up there and buy one and look up this recipe, because you'll like these potatoes. Here he is now, Chef Adan Medrano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corbin. I'm a big fan of yours for many years. You're a great, great, great inspiration. Well, good evening. It's an honor to be here at this celebration and to be actually part of the Grover E. Murray Studies in the American Southwest, to help it, to support it, and to have my book as part of it. It's a big honor. Now, in my book, I have found that the culinary arts, the foods of the Southwest, are difficult to study. and they're difficult to document. And that's because the subject of my research, of your research, is really inviting, and you end up eating your research material. And then where are you? My book is Truly Texas Mexican, a Native Culinary Heritage in Recipes. It's a new type of cookbook because it's also part history book. In the first 2 chapters, I review the culinary history of the first people of Texas, Native Americans who first arrived in Texas over 10,000 years ago. They are the ancestors of today's Mexican-American community of Texas. They are my ancestors. The history is based on 3 sources of knowledge: the written historical record, the archaeological record, and the oral histories of my family and the Mexican-American communities throughout Texas. These 3 sources tell a complex story of social, cultural, and political encounters that were often frighteningly violent. Very sad. I find that writing is like cooking, taking many elements or ingredients and by artful technique, making a coherent, dynamic book or dish. And it has to be inviting. In my case, I wrote and rewrote the stories behind the recipes, the stories that reveal a cooking style that it has as its philosophical center. Prepare a table where all are welcome. As I look back over 400 generations of Native Americans of Texas, I'm fascinated by our cooking techniques, the development of ingenuity and cooking techniques like steaming, roasting, baking, blending. After I graduated from the CIA, that's Culinary Institute of America, okay? Please. I spent 3 years documenting the stories and recipes of this particular cuisine we call casero style. Casero is home cooking, and it's indigenous Texas Mexican food. In addition to reading historical documents and visiting archaeological sites, I also visited my brothers and sisters many times, family visits during which I tarried. I kept lingering, making excuses. What is the technique of that? Well, and I questioned, if the truth be told, I just wanted to eat more food. And it's the food I grew up with, and I think it's delicious. But I also want it to be intellectually delicious. I think that knowing the history of the dish makes it more tasty. I just was over at this table and I said, "How did you like it?" And she said, "It's gone." I'm glad about that. Every chef I know believes that an educated public makes for more delicious, more nutritious food. When my book was declared a finalist Book of the Year by Forward Reviews, I was delighted because it meant more people would get to know about our Texas Mexican food. Sharing our food is what drove me to write this book. I realized during culinary school that my family's food, the food of the Mexican-American community of Texas, was invisible. The only thing people know is what is called Tex-Mex. You all know Tex-Mex. I'm not one to turn down gooey cheese combination plates with the enchiladas, but Texas Mexican food is before Tex-Mex and it is beyond Tex-Mex. To note the difference does not disparage one or the other. I simply love to share our food, and that's why I work so hard on getting the recipes just right. When I first interviewed my family and cooks, they said, "A pinch of that, throw a little bit of water." I said, "No, that is not helping very much." I wanted to communicate a recipe precisely so that you can replicate it at home without too much fuss. It is important to get measurements correct. No, it's not 1/2 teaspoon minced jalapeno. It's 1/4 teaspoon. Yes. I tested and measured and tasted each recipe at least 3 times, sometimes much more. I spent a fattening 3 months in my kitchen, 10 to 12 hours every day. After I finished the last recipe, I immediately hired an exercise trainer. And I threatened him with garlic and chiles if he didn't get me to lose 10 pounds quickly. That's true. The potato and poblano chile dish that you are tasting tonight is completely indigenous. Both chiles and potatoes are indigenous to the Americas. I spent this morning with the staff of the catering company. I went over there and walked and just introduced myself. They let me in the kitchen. So I would like to salute the chef, Dewey McMurray, his staff, chefs and cooks, Gina de la Rosa, Jose Lopez, Germán Martinez, Ida Campos, Eric Barbosa, and Leti Maldonado for cooking a delicious meal tonight. If you choose to cook this recipe, it's in my book. Buy my book, okay? That's the subtext. Use fresh poblanos. That's what I use in my book. If you don't take my advice and you buy canned chiles, you're going to culinary hell. Not really, but the point is to make each dish as delicious and as inviting as you can possibly make it. My book points out that the culinary arts open up an aesthetic of welcoming. And the ultimate delicious joy is to prepare a table where all are welcome. Thank you.
See, I told you those potatoes were great. We're going to sell all those books back there tonight, I can tell you. Thank you. All right, now we got to go with Frank Sikes, a U.S. Navy veteran, third generation West Texan. Grew up in Plainview, which is a suburb to the north of here. When LaVern Roach, along with Jimmy Dean, were hometown heroes, Frank received his bachelor's degree from Texas Tech in 1967. Boy, he's a young fella for looking so old. And his master's degree from Wayland Baptist University in 2011. West Texas Middleweight, The Story of LaVern Roach, is Frank's first book, which represents 5 years' worth of painstaking research and writing. All right, Frank, there's your minute.
Our speeches are supposed to be just 6 minutes long tonight. I couldn't get it down to 7, so I made a deal with Barry to take 1 minute off the introduction so I could have it. Thank you, Barry. It's an honor and a joy to be here tonight. It's an honor to share the stage with Sandra, Sylvia, and Adan. I've read all of their books, and they're worth reading. Very good, very well written, good books. And to be introduced by Barry Corbin, wow, kind of makes me feel like I won an Academy Award, and I'm up here giving a speech. Thank you, Barry. Barry and I have several things in common, both West Texas boys, suburbans of Lubbock, both military veterans, both Texas Tech. We attended Texas Tech at the same time. And I just told Barry that we had a common instructor. He mentioned him, Ron Schultz, who taught Barry and G.W. Bailey. And they took all the lead roles. And what I was left with was selling tickets at the box office. So my career ended right there, but yours went a long way. Before I forget it, Barry, if you got any contacts in Hollywood looking for any good material, there's a certain book back there, and I'll even do a screenplay for them. Before I get on to tell you about my journey on how I became here, have to say a few things about West Texas middleweight. Don't let the cover scare you off. Boxing is a brutal sport, and it shows LaVern Roach really socking his opponent in that book. But it's more than just a boxing book. It's more than just a sports book. It's a story of inspiration, it's a history book, and it's a love story also. So don't be afraid. The women, don't be afraid to pick it up. Everybody that I've had read it and talk to me have told me it's a very compelling book. So just a few words about LaVern Roach. He was a Plainswoman boy. He grew up at the age of 12, decided he wanted to be a world champion boxer. From Plainview, Texas, that's not really easy to come by. So it's a book about his journey from Plainview that ended up in New York City, Madison Square Garden, and pursuing his dream. And he came so close to achieving that goal. Some of the things he did achieve along the way was that he was the best Marine fighter to come out of World War II. He was the National Golden Gloves champion. He was Look Magazine's Amateur Boxer of the Year in 1946. He was Ring Magazine Professional Boxer Rookie Boxer of the Year in 1947. And a top 10 contender for the Middleweight Championship of the World. Now, my journey, from the time I was a teenager, I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to be a writer. But it took me 50 years to decide what to write on. So when I got up one morning and decided, I'm going to write on the LaVern Roach story. All I knew about LaVern Roach at that time was that he was from Plainview. He was a boxer. He had a daughter named Ronnie. Ronnie, wave at everybody. That's Ronnie right there. Ronnie graduated from high school with me. And I knew he was, and he lived a very clean sportsman life. That's all I knew about him. You can't write 288 pages just knowing that. So I set out on a journey to learn more about him. First thing I did was go to the Plainview Daily Herald, and I asked, do you have a folder on LaVern Roach? They went to the back, brought out about a 2-inch folder, dust all over it. I don't think anybody had touched it for the last 50 years, and that's the truth. So I opened up the folder and started looking at what was in it. What I found was literally hundreds and hundreds of magazines and newspaper articles from all the major papers in New York City and on the East Coast. And it started, I thought, well, there probably is a story here with so much information. Then I started seeing some letters that came from Angelo Dundee. If you know anything about boxing, you know who Angelo Dundee was. He was a trainer of Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Sugar Ray Leonard, and about 13 other world champions. So in the boxing world, he was something. So as I left the Herald that day, one of the newspaper people came up to me and said, well, if you're really going to write this story, you need to talk to LaVern's widow, Evelyn. She lives up in a suburb a little bit north in Canyon. So Evelyn's here tonight. Evelyn, raise your hand. Evelyn provided me with all kinds of letters from LaVern, photos, memorabilia, and more important, her consent for me to write the book. So I thank you for that. Evelyn told me, said, you probably should check with a guy named Chalk Hutchison. Chalk is here tonight. Chalk was the AJ sports writer at the time and personal friend of LaVern. He got to know him real well. Back before there was Twitter and Facebook and everything, people used to actually write letters. And LaVern wrote a lot of letters to Chalk. So through these letters, I was able to get to know the person of LaVern Roach. And so without Chalk and his information, saving all those letters, the book wouldn't have happened. So I appreciate that, Chalk. 4.5 years ago, I was sitting right out there. It's a different building, but I was sitting at a table. And it was my first literary Lubbock function. And I think Dr. Burke, I think he's here tonight. He was up here giving a talk about his book. And I was out there at a table. I didn't know anybody at the table, strangers. And after hearing his talk, I thought, that's going to be me next year. Well, this is 4.5 years ago. So I just finished what I thought was a perfect manuscript. So I took it to Texas Tech University Press. Dr. Ivor, the sports editor, looked at it, and he did not agree that it was a perfect manuscript. By the time it came back to me, it was marked up, so I thought I was back in chemistry in college. But anyway, the very end of it, he said it's a story that needs to be told. So I thought, okay, so it progressed. The next step, it was they sent it out to anonymous readers, number 1 and 2. I don't know where those people are. They came back pretty much the same thing, a lot of markings on it, and one of them even suggested that, he said, looks like this guy, it may be his first book. He may want to consider getting somebody to help him write it. I took exception to that, so I rewrote it, turned it back into Tech. Next year I went to another literary Lubbock function, rewrote it, turned it back into Tech. Did this about 2 or 3 times. Then when it was finally accepted, I thought, next year's the year I'm going to be there. There's 2015, and they stopped this function. So I thought, there it goes. But I'm really glad that Tech approved it. And they have been so supportive in the production and the marketing and the distribution of the book. I just want to say special thanks to the Texas Tech University Press, if I leave anybody out, but to Courtney, Joanna, John, Amanda, Casey, Isabella. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I want to thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm tired of walking around to those steps. Next, we got up a native Texan, Sandra Scofield, divides her time between Missoula, Montana, and Portland, Oregon. She's written several novels, a memoir, a craft book for writers, an excerpt from The Mysteries of Love and Grief, won first place in Narrative Magazine's 2014 Spring Story Contest. Sandra is an avid landscape painter. She's featured writer at Texas Tech University Library's Sowell Family Collection in Literature, Community, and the Natural World. Please welcome Sandra Scofield.
Thank you all for being here, and I'll save some minutes by saying, Frank, ditto. He said lots of thanks to all the same people and the same kind of feelings that I have about them. I will add to that it's very nice to be at an occasion for which people dress up. I get really tired of everybody in their pajamas at the grocery store, and I myself am inclined to spend days in pajamas. So I do appreciate the quality of the attendees, also the food, and in general, I'm grateful to be included in anything by Texas Tech University Press. I admire them greatly, and I didn't go anyplace else with this book. This is where I wanted to be. I do want to say, before I make comments about the book, that the book is something that I knew I wanted to write for a very long time, My grandmother died in 1983, and I started writing this book in 2013. I would never have written this book without Judith Keeling. She was a longtime editor of the press, is still involved with them, and is my very dear friend. And her encouragement, insight, her just being there made it possible for me to do what seemed impossible. The latest thinking about memory in the brain science world is this. Memories are not filed in your head. They are not recipes or photos or old letters. Instead, they are simply data. And the memory is created on the spot when you pull it up and fashion the narrative that you need at the time. The old salve that the writer who writes biography or autobiography or memoir, nonfiction, is looking for the truth may sound right and feel right. And it is possible to find and use concrete evidence of fact, who, where, what, when, and so forth. But the meaning of the past comes from one's contemporary construction of the story. In other words, all of us make stories because we need them. I understand this a lot better now than I did before I wrote my book. It took me 30 years from the death of my grandmother, Frida, to sit down to do the work. I was afraid that I would be too sad. I didn't know where to start. I thought maybe it wasn't my business to question her life. But my grandmother was always there for me when she was alive. And it turned out she was there for me when she wasn't. She was a woman with great burdens and great courage, great love, and more than a cup of anger that she sipped at all her life. She never instructed or criticized me, but I often felt her gaze and measure. I hoped that I would let go of my questions and grief by constructing, what else, a story. And what I learned is that a life narrative isn't four-sided like a cube or flat like paper. It is infinite and hard to hold. I hope that Mysteries of Love and Grief is a good story with puzzles and surprises, reflections, moments of joy and apprehension. I have learned as an aging person and a passionate grandmother how much I am my grandmother, Frida, in good ways. And though there is a tender place in the breast, always, my thoughts of her since I wrote this book are much less frequent, and I'm glad for that. They are also more affectionate, and they are more narratively bound. I feel close to her now when I am at my easel, remembering the pleasure she found in art late in her life. I recently gave my 7-year-old granddaughter, who is constantly drawing dragons and sword-wielding princesses, a small copy I had made of Frida's painting of sunflowers. And I told her, "Edie, look, this is something my grandmother made." And Edie said, "All of us are makers." For my granddaughter and for readers, I compiled a list of the things I learned about getting along in life from my grandmother. I called them admonitions. Each one reminds me that my grandmother wanted me to be a good person and to live a good life. So I'll end by reading admonitions. Wear deodorant. Don't pout. Eat your leftovers. Hang up your dress and your towel. Clean up your own messes. Keep your hair clean and make a straight part. Bite your tongue. Answer your elders. Don't sass. Stop biting your nails. Turn off lights. Fill up the tank before you need to. Rinse your dish. Don't complain if you can't have it, if you don't want it, if it isn't fair. When you're bored, keep it to yourself, and don't let a stranger know you're upset. Get out of the way. Don't gossip. Don't say anything you'd mind having repeated. Don't be nosy. Don't beg when the answer is no. Don't let boys tell you dirty jokes. Study and practice. God made you smart for a reason. Write thank you notes. Excuse me. Write thank you notes. Be polite to clerks and waiters and cleaners and everyone who labors, but be wary of salesmen. Keep the tub, the toilet, the sink, and the kitchen floor clean. Don't envy rich people. You have what you need, and they're no better than you. Take care of your belongings. A lot of things will last a lifetime. Look out for little kids. And remember, I love you. Thank you.
That's my exercise for the day. Sylvia Gann Mahoney was an educator for 33 years at community colleges in Texas and New Mexico. As an administrator, teacher, and rodeo team coach, she became involved in the Great Western Trail Project through the Rotary Club of Vernon. In 2015, Sylvia was named a Fellow of the West Texas Historical Association, and in 2016, Finding the Great Western Trail was awarded the Rupert Richardson Award and named finalist for the Will Rogers Memorial Award Medallion Award. Sylvia is a fourth-generation Texan and now lives in my hometown, Fort Worth.
We may live in Fort Worth, but I too was born in a suburb of Lubbock. I was born at Levelland. So Barry, our trail goes along the same way, except I'm not on the big screen. I would like to say one thing before I start my 6 minutes. I have two people here that I became friends with in the third grade. One of them, Euless Black, came from Idaho to be here tonight as my special guest. And Johnny Fisher and his wife, he and his wife live in Lubbock and saw in the paper about the Literary Lubbock, and they're here tonight. Raise your hand, Johnny. Those roots on the plains make firm friends, don't they, Barry? Good evening. I would like to focus on the power of one. One thesis, Jimmy Skaggs' thesis, approved in 1965 by Texas Tech. One goal, mark the Great Western Trail from Mexico across 9 U.S. states into Canada. One word, great. One word for the many trail segments. One congressional study for National Historic Trail designation for the Great Western Trail and the Chisholm Trail. One university, Texas Tech, played a major role in all this. Thank you. Famed historian and folklorist J. Frank Dobie, who taught at that school with the Longhorn mascot, found that their history department would not approve cowboys, longhorns, and trails as acceptable subjects for scholarly research. For 91 years, university historians ignored the Great Western Trail. One thesis, in 1965, 3 Texas Tech history professors approved for scholarly study historian Jimmy Skaggs' proposed thesis, The Great Western Cattle Trail to Dodge City, Kansas. Skaggs' 137-page definitive study, not published, needs to be, but easily accessible online at Texas Tech archives. was the trusted source for our project to resurrect the almost forgotten Great Western Trail. One Texas Tech historian called the Great Western Trail project the most amazing public research project in America. One goal: document the 7-year project to verify the 2,000-mile trail of the Great Western Trail. My book, Finding the Great Western Trail, published by Texas Tech Press, did that. The trail was marked with 7-foot white cement posts with Great Western Trail in red letters. Volunteers made and funded and erected more than 200 posts. Each post weighs 225 pounds. Communities along the trail held ceremonies to dedicate their first post with Red River water. You have to have that water for cattle and West Texans and all of us. National, local, and state officials joined local citizens to celebrate their rich cattle trail history at the dedications. The spark that fired the project was at a Chisholm and Great Western Trail meeting at the 2002 Lubbock National Cowboy Symposium and Celebration. A Chisholm Trail historian offered to furnish Great Western Trail molds to make the cement post, with a challenge to the Oklahomans to place posts every 6 miles across that state, a distance of 235 miles. The Oklahomans accepted the challenge. They turned around and challenged a Texas Rotary Club to mark the trail across Texas, just 640 miles. We Texans knew we could do that. It's Texas. Texas Rotarians immediately appointed 2 co-chairmen, one a Davy Crockett reenactor, and the other, well, let's just say, I couldn't say no. A 640-mile challenge, no budget, no statewide initiative, but many volunteers using the Rotary Network, a network of business people. Soon, Rotarians in the other 7 states connected with this idea, as well as the Rotary International President Ray Klingsmith, who was using the theme Cowboy Logic and Cowboy Ethics for his international tour. Some 800 volunteers made it possible to mark the trail through 3 countries: Mexico, U.S., Canada. Some of us traveled to all the dedications and self-funded project. One word: great. Cattle drovers going north used the name for the next supply point. Each segment had a different name. Until Skaggs's definitive study, no one had connected all the segments. Skaggs logically used the name Great Western Trail because it crossed the Great Plains, which is identified on old maps as the Great American Desert. Logical. One congressional study: Congress should vote to designate the 2 trails as National Historic Trails, maybe late December, early January 2017. Texas Tech history professor Paul Carlson, who's here tonight, thank you, Paul. Archivist Monty Monroe and Ty Kreidler, executive director of the West Texas Historical Association, provided hours of research for the congressional study to designate the 2 trails. Texas Tech again. However, a National Parks employee who finalized the study used the name Western, not Great Western. He failed to include Skaggs's Texas Tech definitive study and instead credited a self-published book by a Kansas author 39 years after Skaggs's thesis. Without this one word, great, the trail designation becomes disconnected with actual history. We are working feverishly on a letter-writing campaign to Congress to prevent this mistake from being approved. We have a sample letter, and if you would like a copy and you would like to help, let me know. Leave a business card, leave your email. I'll send you the sample. I think we as West Texans can keep Great Western Trail instead of Western. We need your help. Thanks to Dr. Skaggs, now deceased, for providing verification for the Great Western Trail project. He can't speak for himself, so we have to speak for him. Thanks to Texas Tech press editor Judith Keeling, now retired, who saw 21st century trail history in the making. Thanks to Texas Tech Press, Courtney Burkholder and Joanna Conrad, who skillfully moved my book into publication. Thanks to my friend since the third grade and author Euless Black, who came from Idaho to be here tonight. He read my manuscript about 3 times. He was raised on a ranch in Lee County, New Mexico, Little Texas. To Dr. Paul Carlson, who gave valuable insight into weaving the complex narrative. And thanks to Texas Tech for publishing my book and for preserving past and present history. Thank you.
Whew, that's the last time I'm going to do that. After you finish your dessert, we invite you to join the authors in the reception area where they can personalize their books for you. But first, a few announcements. There's always those. Let's all remember that events like Literary Lubbock are made possible by groups like Texas Tech Friends of Libraries. If you're not already a member of this great organization, we hope you'll consider joining at any of the levels you see posted. You can begin your membership tonight and receive an additional 5% discount on top of this evening's exclusive discount. We thank you for coming. We hope you'll want to join us next year for Literary Lubbock 2017. Please, in support of Literary Lubbock and the Grover E. Murray Studies in the American Southwest, be sure to purchase books and get them signed for yourself and as gifts. Christmas is coming up. Y'all know people that read. Pick up a bunch of them. Good night, everybody.